So back at a meeting at ONS up in the Shard, James next presented about the amazing amount of transformation that has gone on within British Gas, and he'll give you a bit of background, I'm sure, in the future. But at coffee just afterwards, I was chatting with him and he said, but actually the hardest thing I did was change the culture for some of the analysts. And as you can imagine, me having this in mind, I thought I'd really like to encourage James to talk about the people bits of the transformation. So over to James. Thank you.
Thank you. And what Tim didn't tell me when he was constructing the flow of this was that the flow from mine would be from spectacular failure. So I hope that's not the segue into this completely. I'm going to tell you a bit of background, but then focus on the core thing that you probably want to hear about. So the story is more of the context of hopefully what we can discuss today. So I have this title of Director of Management Information at British Gas. Really, we deal with all of the data, all the way from performance reporting at the bottom end, all the way through to external reporting, and to a conversation I was having with one of our friends from the ONS earlier about all the RFIs we deal with, or requests from information from regulators, etc. So a whole spectrum of information that I deal with. So when I joined British Gas 2.5-3 years ago, I really set a simple vision. And what you will see through most of my presentation is none of this is groundbreaking or earth-shattering. So a really, really simple vision for what we wanted to do with the information at British Gas. And what I found, and this does help with the context, is you think about British Gas and you think, oh, they just provide energy or they service my boiler. What I found in my pre-joining research was they don't just do that. They fix drains, they fix electrical capabilities like fridges, they do house insurance, they produce connected homes products like Hive, connected boilers, smart meters, etc. So when you join, you find it's actually about 20 odd companies. And we do all of that in the B2C space and in the B2B space. So fabulously complex world that I found when I joined. And in terms of an information perspective, any of you who've worked in large companies or maybe even medium-sized ones, I suspect you will have found problems like this. They are not unusual. So lots of siloed information and siloed business owners, lots of inflexibility, lots of very manual workarounds, no real terms of reference for the team, so they would have to do anything and everything to do with data. Very business unit focused, so lots of customer data, but not real customer focus within the information or the data. And some not great best practices. And what I realized was what we had to do here was, it wasn't the technology that was broken. It wasn't that we had the wrong people with the wrong skills. It wasn't that we had inappropriate processes. It wasn't the culture that was broken. And it wasn't the data that had problems. It was the lot. So you have to tackle it from all of those angles. So a big people, process, technology, culture, and data transformation we kicked off there. One of the key things around solving it and practically around doing these things, about saying that and having that vision is easy. What's your target operating model? Where do you want to get to? And your target operating model of what you want to achieve isn't a new data set and capability. It's not a new team structure. It's not a few new processes. It's how all of that comes together. For on the left-hand side of the diagram, dealing with your demand from all your different types of internal customers, all the way through how you create the capabilities from all of those aspects, on through to how you deliver services at the end. So what you have to think about is actually, what are you trying to deliver? What are the outcomes you want, and what are the incomes that you are looking for? So one of the big things we focused on as a team, and obviously as you'll see through this, this is certainly something I didn't do on my own. It was a very team job to get this over the mark, was to set and train the transformation to achieve this target operating model. But one of the first steps was identifying what that needed to be. Now, for fear of turning this into just a talk about how we did the transformation and British Gas, I'm going to pull out a few really important things along that journey that have made a massive difference. And to the point that Tim said in his overview and has been covered a few times today, One of the big things was the culture, both within our internal customers and the company and the analysts themselves. So to take you back on history, what happened within the company was a customer who knew what they wanted and knew all about their business would come to a management information team and tell you, I want you to build this report and this is how it looks. And the analyst would go, oh, how many of those reports do you want? How often do you want them to run and what colour do you want them? And it was very service and transaction. What I found when I joined to one of the earlier slides was that there were 900 to 1,000 reports in the company. So I started asking a few simple questions. What do you use it for? How many times has that report been accessed and looked at in the last day, week, month, year? If you look at it, what do you do with it? Are you actually going to make a decision? Are you going to change something about the way you run your business? Is it providing you with any insight? And what it came back to as we were trying to work out what to do new for the future was to sitting down with our internal customers and running workshops and talking to them and saying, what are your business objectives? What are you trying to achieve? Because that's, to be honest, all they're interested in. They don't care about analytics and data, etc., and how you achieve it. They want to sell more. They want to make customers happier. They want to serve people better. So what are they trying to achieve? And so what information do you need to support that? But this 5 questions approach, which is standard consultancy model, is all around how are you going to use it? So to the point, we as analysts have to be very careful. It's brilliant statistical information and really, really well structured and well done and very clever. But is anybody going to change anything? And it was going back to those basics of asking those, getting a clear understanding of the business questions. What we use today, and do people actually use it? So to give you an idea, out of 900 odd reports that were produced by the business, I turned 200 off with nobody noticing. I had one complaint, and that was after a couple of months. Amount of effort to produce 200 reports day in, day out, quite large, very wasteful. And sadly, people doing that as their day job and somebody not having the courtesy to use it or turn it off. Understanding what the gap is in requirements and actually what you need to develop to service the questions that the business really want to answer. So not what you want, changing the culture of the questioning to what you need. So in terms of failures and successes, some teams get this. But this is really hard. This difficult conversations and negotiations, and this is some of where we're going with the conversation and presentation. If you haven't got people who can ask those questions and can front up to, with good standing, a sales director and talk to them as an equal and be treated as an equal, then it's hard. And certainly within the company, certain teams buy this and certain individuals are very good at it, but others aren't. And that's from the analyst community of my side and from the customer community. So don't get me wrong, I haven't solved all of this yet. It's working in places and challenging in others. The other thing was changing a mindset. Deliberately you can't read that, but one of the mindsets in the business was that team deliver reports. Well, actually, no, we don't. A report is just a way of viewing an outcome or viewing a set of information. To try and convince them and make them understand that we weren't building point solutions to answer that one question, that actually we were trying to build joined up capabilities so they had flexibility, so that once they'd answered that question, they could then answer the next question and the next one and the next one. So it was a mindset of, I'll come to you with this predefined view of what I want the outcome to look like and be. Changing that mindset to, I need to understand basics like what are the facts and dimensions that you want to measure your business by, so that when you come in and start to not only understand the what of the answer, but start going into the why, that I've got the flexibility to do that. So moving away from point solutions. And also by building up this capability in the background, changing it from a very product business unit focused world to saying, I'm going to join all of that to customer. I'm going to join all these products into that individual person that I'm actually trying to serve. Because when you go back to what's the business question, Actually, I'm trying to make the customer happy. Yes, it's a company. You're trying to make money as well, so I need to understand how to do that efficiently. And I'm trying to make people's jobs easier by delivering them information. So again, a change in mindset from a customer thinking about an output they want to what business question are you trying to solve and what flexibility of information do you need to do that. And again, moving on from that, and this gets into a really interesting area. So the subject of democratization of data is quite an interesting one. I have certain people in my company and other companies who believe that you can deliver raw data. Ooh, thunder. Interesting this time of year. There's people and there's specific software companies that I mentioned who will have everyone believe that raw data with an end user with a great tool can create fabulous analytics really quickly. Now, I think most of the people in the room and some of the discussions earlier will realise that that myth means you can do really rubbish stuff very quickly and make it look very pretty. But actually, if your data's garbage at the bottom and you don't understand what you're putting into this stuff, then it produces terrible results. However, what's the flip side of that? Do I say, right, you have to come to me and my team will answer your question and I'm not going to let you near the data? Well, if you do that, and I found this to my pain, they'll find the data somewhere. Somebody else will give it to them. They'll work their way around your team. And a great big shadow community, if not already there, will grow up in the background to do this. So one of the things we switched our mindset was, how do I give them actually access to really well structured, really well defined, but fairly granular data? Not so granular that it damages Data Protection Act and gets into looking at details that they shouldn't look into, but granular enough and well structured enough so that they can actually do to some degree the analytics and insight they want themselves in a safe way. So yes, we do deliver operational reports and certain fixed views. We do deliver regulatory and executive court scorecards that are pre-canned and drillable, but we also are now delivering self-serve data sets for people with a bit of analytical capability to leverage the information. And where's our target? I haven't shown you some of our existing reports because you have to be careful at these things. Whenever you show an existing report, sadly it contains company data and I can't share any of that. But if I voice over that, if you'd looked at our reports historically, what you get is a lot of tabular data. And a typical reporting pack could be 20 pages of numbers with no graphs, with no trends, with no commentary, and with no visualization. So what we're also trying to educate the teams within the company on is to try and bring it alive. Try and turn data in something that draws you in, is exciting and insightful. Now, I must admit, on some of these, on the first one, actually I've got no idea what it's telling me. It's fabulously pretty, and this is what I also preach about it, is don't take visualization too far when the creativity outweighs actually anything you're trying to say. So that's quite challenging. However, what you can do with all types of data, the top right one is all about different musical genres and visualization of that to show how different people can dot across different genres and different types of music. Is quite a good way of displaying it. The other one is how growth of power stations happen across the American system. So I don't know how we got this data if our academic colleagues couldn't get it, but this is basically visualizing the growth of power stations and power outputs over time and showing a great way of displaying it and narrowing in on hotspots that you couldn't get through traditional data. And the other one is just a nice interactive dashboard that draws you in through a set of dials and measures. So going that extra mile to make data interesting. And how do we engage? Well, this is part of the process, is turn those people who are your customers, as it were, those people you're trying to service information to, bring them into the process. Run meetings and workshops with them rather than dry, cold requirements. They own the business rules, and don't let them ever forget that that they need to sign them off and they need to document what stuff needs. I think somebody said the conversation earlier, they spent a couple of hours defining what a claim was. Dull, but absolutely vitally important, because if 20 people across the company believe a claim or a sale is something different from everyone else, then all the numbers are pointless. We've moved to a more sprint agile methodology. So we've actually got the business user in the room with the developers, with the solution designers, so they can actually help to understand and co-create the solution. Gets them on the hook as well for what you're delivering. So basically making sure that if you're using stuff like reference data that the business owns, that there's a process to update it. Sounds really basic, but if you forget that every year the targets need updating, then every January you have a horrible runaround because all your reports fall over and fail. And it's amazing, I've seen in so many companies how things like Easter and Christmas catch people out every year, which is rather bizarre. Get those power users and users within the business and train them up and get them to become your advocates rather than just delivering pre-packaged solutions for them. So do a bit of a hub and spoke model. Get your comms great, and you need time and engagement from you and their teams on all of that. So this is just some of the environments. So some of the environments can help. Didn't come out very well pictorially, but these are rooms that I got our facilities guys to actually create. Spent a few £1,000s on creating actual rooms that are sprint and agile rooms where a whole team working on stuff can whiteboard ideas, have daily stand-ups, work through their burn down charts of what they're delivering. And like I say, the customer will come in maybe at the beginning and the end of the day and work out what we've done, and they can be drawn in to do the work. And what it does is creates a bit of an energy and a hive of activity to deliver a solution. Get real ownership through doing some stuff like that. So don't just think about the practical, how technically we're going to do it, how we're going to create the environment for success. We've had to look at a completely new technology framework. So to the points earlier about not having much data, we've got tons of it. Just to give you a flow through into some of the newer stuff we're doing. So all of our data, from being in a world where I had Oracle, Teradata, SQL Server, SAS, business objects, Microsoft, etc., every software and hardware known to man, all of the new capabilities are now going to be in a Hadoop data store. We're basically pouring everything in the bottom of this thing we call a lake at raw transactional level. So if you imagine our billing systems and CRM systems are SAP, and our telephony systems are a certain other type, we pour all of that in raw. We then use tools like Hive, Python, Impala, others, to actually transform that data from gobbledygook. If anybody knows anything about SAS, you get lovely tables of raw events in German, and we have to decipher what all those events mean and turn them into something that's called a sale or a claim or whatever. And we do lots of the transformation of the data, turning it into basically cubes. So at the bottom of this end, yes, you can employ data scientists to write fabulous algorithms and use high-end technology to play in the data store at the bottom, but they have to have an intrinsic knowledge of the business processes. They have to be heavy coders. They have to be insightful analysts, and they have to be storytellers. And I think in a number of other conferences, I've heard people talk about searching for unicorns. Well, in most organizations, you can't really find them. So my approach and view is you might have one or two people dipping in the bottom, but to power the business, turn that raw stuff into something that's tangible, well-structured, dealt with all the quality problems, and people can play with and get the value out of. So we structure it into cubes and marks, to use probably a bit of loose terminology, but it's easy to explain. And then we actually deploy the stuff to the business through SharePoint, through some of the Microsoft product sets, so people can drill in and analyze the data, but we can secure and protect it. So some of the things we've achieved over a couple of years of transformation, I won't talk about them all, but to enable these cubes and stuff, and that's why I've highlighted one of these in blue, getting out and actually defining the business rules and defining those items of what is a sale, what is a claim, what is a renewal. sounds basic and daft, and we've done over 1,800 of them and created 125 reference data sets. Without that, you cannot make sense of the information. And it's absolutely vital work. So a lot of the other stuff's been really important. Certainly the creating a competency framework. And if people don't know what that is, that's basically what skills do I need in my team to be able to turn raw business ideas into great product. I need to understand all the skills from storytelling one end, and fabulously insightful people who understand the business, all the way through to somebody who's great at coding in open source capabilities. They might not be the same person, but I've got to work out the mix of competencies I need in my team to do that. So lots of strategic learning and development and lots of training. But part of that development, please be aware, is analysts learning about the business. So one of the problems I found again within the team when I joined was somebody would run a report and I'd sit there and say, oh, okay, well, what's that showing me? I don't know. They'd read out the title of the report. It's a bit like when I go to PC World and I ask one of the people in the store about why would I buy that computer versus that one, and they read the badge out to me, which is always fabulously insightful for me. But get them to understand the business and the business problems and why they're producing a report or a piece of insight or analysis so that they can tell the story and add value. Otherwise, it's a bit pointless. So some of the key points I'm trying to draw out in the presentation, and then we're going to do a bit of interactive stuff. Really, what you've got to do is change the relationship and move from being a service provider to actually a part of the business that's on a par with them, and that what you're delivering has a purpose, it will be used, and it has an impact on key business objectives. Account management and negotiation skills are a key analyst tool set. If you can't build the relationship with the business that you're serving and talk their talk and walk their walk, then they won't engage you or take you on board. But not everybody in the team has to be good at that. I'm happy to have some people in the background who don't like the light of day and don't like talking to people, but as long as you've got the good mix. But those people, and this comes on into what we're delivering, a real focus on negotiation skills. Because if you aren't willing to stand toe-to-toe in part of those teams with the business and say, no, you don't need that. And we talked about certain failures on our table that we probably wouldn't air the light of day on it, but some of those failures are because people in this kind of mindset, this kind of job will not turn around and say, I'm not doing that, it's daft, it won't add you any value, it's a waste of time. So you've got to have those negotiation skills. You've got to deliver iteratively, prioritize key deliverables, and empower the business. I say you want them to be using safe data. They'll find a way of using data anyway. So make sure that what you deliver them is safe for them to use. Otherwise, they'll work around you. This is the bit where the big data thing, it gets my goat. In sometimes it's great. There's a great hype about it. It's done a lot for the industry. In others, people seem to think you can throw out the best practice that's been learned over years. Unstructured data is fun, and you can do lots with it. But actually, really well-organized structured data is very good at powering a business and understanding what's going on. And there's a great set of capabilities you need to learn in terms of making data high quality, making it well-defined, making it well-structured so that it can be used. And my line would be, create a structured framework where you can around information and then link it to some unstructured stuff. So it's got a bit more context and something to cling to. It's a bit like an analogy I wouldn't ever just believe research, because people don't often tell you the truth. And if you looked at the research for the last general election, if you believed the research beforehand, the result afterwards was very different. Similarly, I wouldn't ever just believe data. So the analogy I think I used earlier is, if your store performance is going through the floor in one store, then find out whether the store manager's sick or they're digging up the car park and there's nowhere to go in that store. Work out why. So you need a blend of both. And similar to that, use structured data next to unstructured stuff to make sure you make sense out of it. Accept some imperfection and workarounds. Don't try and create the perfect solution. It'll take too long. And don't underestimate the culture team that you need in your business and the teams to make a good transformation like this land. And to the points earlier, if you don't get the management bought into this and the leadership, it won't happen. So that's some of the stuff. Are we going to do questions, or did you want to dive into our
first,
exercise? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I don't. You may well have some questions you want to put directly to James about his experience in British Gas before we do the reflection thing later. So, are there any questions?
I've got a question.
There's a microphone about to appear.
Hello. My question is not so much about technology.
Yeah.
We all get lots of people talking to us about technology. When you came in, you were faced with the problems you were facing. How did you change or get new people in to deliver what you wanted? Because I think that's the bigger challenge.
As in the recruitment?
Well, or how did you change working with the people to get to stop them doing the way they were doing it and get them to do it the way they should be doing it?
So a number of ways of approaching it. I had a great guy who's not here, Ross, often comes along helping me with the process. A lot about it is trying to take those people on a journey. What I found from some of the early workshops with the team was that team knew what they needed to do differently. So actually it was a lot of running some workshops with some of the team and saying, well, what does it feel like at the moment for you? How's it working for you at the moment? At the end of a transformation, what would it look like for you? And how would we get there? So part of it is working with the team to take them on the journey and them creating the vision and the solution. So I didn't certainly walk in day one and say, right, this is what we're going to do, this is how we're going to do it, everybody come with me. It was, right, what do you believe is wrong? And I did a lot of finding in the business as to what do you believe is wrong, but I worked with the team to come up with that vision and view. Then we looked at the capabilities we needed for the future, and you do have to go through a harsh process of, do I have all of the right people with the right skills? Can I train it or can't I? And in certain things like, I don't know, it wasn't an easy one to pick, information policy and governance, I had no knowledge and specialist skills in my team on that. So I had to hire it in. And like with many of you will know, when you're looking for specialist skill sets in this whole area, is actually it's a waiting game to find a good candidate, because they're not, you can't just go and pick and choose them off the shelf. So it was a mixture of taking them on the journey by getting them involved in the vision, a lot of training and development of soft and harder skills, and then actually bringing in new skills and capabilities as you needed it. So a whole blend. There's no one answer on that one.
Any other questions? I have one myself.
Yeah.
As you can imagine, I really like talking to James, because James is very good at keeping my feet on the floor, because as you can see, I come up with lots of wacky ways to do it, and James regularly reminds me that a company by definition has to do the same thing over and over and over again, and that is actually how the money's made for all of us. So it intrigues me how you encourage some of the, you need one or two, but not many people like me inside the organisation. But a lot of people like me just would walk a mile from an organisation like British Gas, me being one of them. It's why I've never been employed by any of them. How do you balance that culture?
It's interesting because sometimes you bring people in as contractors sometimes because you know they'll only want to be there or do something for a short period of time, and then you bring them in for impact and change. Others actually like the big organisation structure and the wrap that goes around it. So again, what you're looking at an awful lot is the personality types and mix that you need within the team to make something happen. And a lot about taking people on a transformation journey is trying to understand what buttons to push with which people. So yeah, it's the classic thing. Some are fabulously only interested in doing new stuff and insightful things. Well, if that's your passion, then maybe in certain areas I can't employ you, or I'll only bring it in when I need it. So some of that's horses for courses. In another life, I've set up a prototype and innovation team to work alongside a team that hardens and productionizes work. So you keep feeding the new ideas through the prototype and innovation, and that allows you to stay apace with the business. But then you have a different group of people who really like actually taking something and turning it into a product.
Yeah.
So it's about, again, choosing the mix of people and the mix of skills to make something happen. And actually some daft people like me like taking on these big challenges. And to the point earlier, success versus failure, I mean, when I've eventually finished, or whatever finished is on this, I won't have achieved everything I set out to do. And to me, it's always a proportional balance as had I done more very good and successful things that didn't work. So certain things along the way haven't worked. So that's the other thing, is you can't be a perfectionist, because when you're trying to do all of this in transformation, then you'll get on a downward spiral if every time something doesn't quite work out.
And have you found any good tools to find someone who's okay at analysis, but can also do the negotiation bit? Because actually they're quite different mindsets.
We were talking about it earlier at the table. It's quite a questioning process when you recruit someone. And I've often, to be honest, if that's what I'm looking for, will take somebody with limited technical experience if they're good storytellers. Mm-hmm. And if they're willing to learn. So I'm looking a lot for aptitude. In other roles, yeah, you're right, I'm looking for skills and development. But yeah, holding out for somebody who's that perfection, nurture it if you find it, but then I would just flex your boundaries and go, yeah, okay, broadly across our team, I'm looking for this. But actually, if you can find somebody who's a brilliant storyteller and got a bit of nous and is inquisitive to the points earlier, then they're worth their weight. I can train the rest, or actually partner with them with somebody who can do the rest, and create those relationships.
Brilliant. Thank you. So as I said this morning, I don't want to miss the chance of having a group of analysts from all sorts of various backgrounds and not capture some information and get you to reflect on your own situation. So we're going to spend about 15 minutes doing a little bit of what James alluded to in British Gas. But this time, rather than thinking about yourselves, think about your organisation. So I think there's some slides. Just pop the questions up. Can you put the slides up?
I can't.
I know you know.
Somebody
I'm
might
trying
be able
to think
to.
of a signal that sort of means. Oh, no, next one. Anyway. This question is. It might come up in a minute.
It's coming. It's coming.
It's on its way, is it? Think about your own organisations. Move the next one on.
Yep.
And basically, if your own organisation is going to develop an analytical culture, just think for 10 minutes and then we'll come around and share what things could it stop, what could it start, what could it do more of, or what could it do less of, to move a little bit further along the way of being more analytical in the culture. So developing some of these things that James has already talked about, being more democratic. I really like the balance you talked about in terms of enabling people who don't know what they're doing to have safe access to as granular data as possible. I think is a really positive thing. How you might empower some of these people to say no to senior staff, and how you might engage people in the process. There might be one of those or two. So 10 minutes. As I say, there's sheets of paper again and some post-it notes, and then we'll try and capture some of that from each of you in a bit. Thank you. Okay then, we don't want to be late for tea. So I wonder if anybody wants to volunteer some options that they think their organisation ought to stop doing, or they may be responsible for something they could stop doing that might enable a more analytical culture. Go on, go for it, David.
Right, I think you'll all feel the pain of this one. Stop having endless consecutive meetings.
And is that in your gift?
Well, it's unfortunately not in my gift. I identified myself as meeting phobic just this week to my boss because I don't see when the meetings end and the productivity starts. Yeah. That's the problem. But around the table, it was a common issue that people just block themselves into meetings in a sense of just being there in a meeting because they're told to be there without understanding the purpose or the outcome of that meeting.
Definitely not transformational.
No, definitely not.
Excellent. Any other things that people desperately want to stop?
Stop duplication.
Sorry, I didn't hear it.
So stop or diminish duplication.
Stop duplication.
Yeah, it really is a hard one, especially in large organisations. Information's power, and therefore lots of people want to hold it, manage it, and have teams that can look at it. So you end up with huge amounts of duplication. And some of the things that stop duplication are hard to crack in a company because some of it is trust. There has to be trust that whoever is doing that job, that you trust them to do it on your behalf. But lots of companies suffer with inefficiency because there's either it's unclear whose job it is to do something, or it is clear but teams don't get the answer or the throughput they want from that unit, and therefore create duplications of the work. So yeah, it's a big one in a lot of companies.
I like this point you made about if you try and restrict people's access, they'll go and get it somewhere else anyway.
Yeah, and that does cause duplication.
Yeah.
Because it's very difficult. People are trying to achieve stuff. What you have to believe in an organisation is actually everybody in the organisation is trying to achieve success for the organisation. However, if the objectives aren't all aligned and joined up, then they'll want to achieve a certain objective, and if you're something that they need to achieve that, and that's not your priority or what you believe in, then certain organisations, they'll run off and do it themselves, and that's what you see a lot of. So to some degree, try and see if you can serve and help them, and it'll reduce duplication.
Brilliant. Thank you. We're on a roll now.
Hi. I've actually got a bit of a stop-start one. This is stop endless dashboards and report creation and actually start adding some insight. I think you said data is power. It is powerful, but if it's used in the right way, I think the industries I've worked in, people always want to see the same information in different ways, turned around in different ways, and we just did a similar exercise with yourself. We just shut off some reports. But I think, that culture certainly does exist throughout, historically, the industries I've worked in. And I'd like to sort of see more insight and value being shepherded around the business. I think that's where people really start seeing a culture shift, when they actually start realising or things, the analytical team start generating some changes, some actual tangible changes in the business. I think, no one's really been blown away by a dashboard,
Yeah, to me, and I can say this because I've had to produce them, they're comfort blankets. I've got some numbers on that. Well, great. Yeah, but you actually doing anything? Do you understand why that's happening? And therefore, are you going to change anything? So you need the insight. So dashboards are good as initial indicator, but it won't tell you why something's happening. And it's certainly, unless somebody actually gets off and takes an action, won't change anything. So I agree with you.
Excellent. Martin.
I'd like to see a start of a move away from generalist HR support in organisations for analytics. I would love to actually have a HR partner that was a dedicated analytical HR partner. So if I talk about recruiting somebody with MapReduce skills, they don't think it's printing on A5 instead of A3, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I'd build on that one, because another problem I've found and found in my existing company is you get graded levels. And as you get more senior and therefore paid more and better benefits, it's based on your managerial and leadership capabilities. Well, actually, I want a highly skilled person. I want to pay market rate, and I want to give them the right benefits. I don't need the trappings that come with that classic thing of, oh, well, they've got to be a great leader and manager to be paid that much. So, as well as the dedicated support that knows what you're trying to recruit, the other bit I'd say is, actually, I've seen it in some companies, but that dual thing of having a leadership pay scheme and structure, and a technical or excellence pay scheme and structure. And too many companies have an inflexible model.
Yeah, it isn't a plug, but Matt, I know you talk about it quite a bit in the course that you run, the Doug course, and that sort of research framework for management would be in a different
Yeah,
leg.
we don't have training programs that are built to kind of get to that senior what principal analyst might look like. There's the assumption people, as you said, want to be managers beyond the point. It's building the right training programs, the right recruitment, and having somebody in HR who would, that their job is to build the analytical competency, rather than generalists who can kind of lend a hand, but really we kind of have to do it ourselves.
Yeah, and if we're talking to failures, I'll do an admission now. I've thought of one. A failure of mine to the person and to the company was making a brilliant project manager a head of project management. They were a brilliant project manager.
Yeah.
It was wrong for them and wrong for the company for them to try and be the head of.
Yeah.
And mistakes like that are easy to make.
Great. We're moving into tea time. That's always a good time to stop, and a danger when you're looking at the evaluation sheets. So that's prompted me to remember to get you to fill in evaluation sheets. If there is anything else that people are keen to actually tell everybody else about doing more or less, stick it on the post-it notes and the sheets, and we'll capture it and try and circulate the results of those to everybody else afterwards. So thanks again for engaging in this session. We'll have tea, and then we'll listen to DataKind and talk about teamwork with analysts. Thank you very much.